Hello, I'm Richard Chambers, Senior Internal Audit Advisor at Audit Board, and welcome to another in my continuing series, Agents of Change, in which I'm joined by leaders in the internal audit profession to discuss the important challenges of leading internal audit organizations in the 21st century. Today I'm joined by Siebrand Wolberink, who is the Chief Audit Executive with over 15 years' experience. Siebrand also served as the head of internal audit at Deliveroo, an online food service company based in the UK. He is currently the chief audit executive of SoftwareOne, a global software and cloud technology company. Welcome to the show, Siebrand.
Thank you, Richard, also for having me here today.
Yeah, these are exciting and challenging times to be in the internal audit profession, and I know you're having an opportunity to move from one organization to another is giving you a chance to have a leadership role and impact internal auditors across multiple organizations. Is that something that's rewarding for you?
Absolutely, and I think specifically when you can start greenfield, which is really exciting. So there's a real merit, I think, at the moment for internal auditors and also for the profession, and being able to build something from the ground up, which I'll be able to do at SoftwareOne, is tremendously exciting, and also be able to build something that's built for the future, that will be forward-looking, and hopefully built to last.
That's why it's great to have leaders like yourself who bring a new and fresh vision into the roles that they take on. What's your view of internal auditors as agents of change, and why is it more important now for internal auditors than perhaps at any point in the past?
Internal audit leaders have an opportunity to change the status quo and the perception, and I think be able to drive change, you need to have trust. I think the world is in a very different place than we were, let's say, 10 years ago or even like a few years ago. The opportunity for chief audit executives and other audit leaders to unlock the value that internal audit has now has been larger. It's more significant, the opportunity, than it ever has been. Rather than just being focused on compliance and assurance, which I think is really important because we've got to make sure that we protect company assets and have all the bare basic stuff ticked off and ready. I think the forward-looking bit where you're able to be more disruptive, think about thought leadership, how to be able to take a company with you on the journey, and also just by doing the talk, but also walking the talk, I think becomes very important. And you can only do that if you are forward-looking and innovative and disruptive, which means that you have to experiment with things. So I think the agent of change, you can only really get there by leading by example, or at least try to, which will implicitly mean there will be failures, but also successes.
Great insights, and I think I can see now why you enjoy taking on these leadership roles in the internal audit functions. In the past almost 3 years now, it's been a period of massive disruption and heightened complex risk landscape for the world in general and for business and government organizations in particular. And I think you alluded to that in your last answer. How can internal audit serve organizations in identifying, monitoring, and mitigating the kinds of risk that can swiftly undermine a company's ability to change its objectives? There's just been so much risk-induced disruption. How can internal auditors help companies navigate that kind of volatility?
I think you can do it in different ways. I think one way is to really first understand the ask and where your value is as an internal audit function and how to deliver on it. And I think people have a preset and preconceived idea of internal audit. Inherently, this is true. And the question is whether that's the right perception that you would like your stakeholders to have, or whether you need to maybe see if you can change that directly or indirectly using incremental politics and so forth, right? Because it's not usually not at the desired state all at once. I think the complexity in terms of the environment is really interesting. I think I would ask all internal audit leaders, what have you really done to drive impact in these last couple of years in terms of helping the organization deal with that uncertainty? So if I just look at my own recent experience in the last couple of years, I was in a tourist business, so basically we sold tickets, travel, and guess what? COVID completely leveled ticket sales. So we had no margin or no money coming in.
Right.
So without any revenue coming in, when you talk about resilience and uncertainty and people and all of these things, it doesn't get more profound than that.
That's right.
So things, internal audit that we did is we did the horizon scanning. We saw it coming. We tried to get the hearts and the minds of the execs and other people in. You just have to be bold and get people from legal, facilities,
Right.
people team, get look at your technological footprint. If people go to remote, what sort of the switches you have in place, what is the capacity? You have to really think it through with playbooks. So we probably had 30, 35 people for a couple of months working on playbooks before it happened, like 4 or 5 months before it really happened. There's a bit of an educational point where you need to be able to be convincing and be able to take people with you on the journey and just demonstrate value without saying, I told you so. I don't think you can ever do that or should as an internal audit function, but you're trying to make sure that people that are tasked with taking the best type of decisions possible can take the best types of decisions from a risk-based perspective.
You make an excellent point there, Siebrand, and I want to go back to something that you sort of alluded to, and that you talked about how the pandemic presented such extraordinary risks for the company that you worked for that was selling tickets. But yet, what we saw during the pandemic is that potentially existential risks for some companies were incredible opportunities for others. So, you know, the food delivery industry, for example, where you ended up, was a place that saw tremendous growth during the pandemic. What did you learn from your vantage point about risks and opportunities, and how the same experience can create risks for one company and opportunities for another?
Yeah, it's a very stark contrast, food delivery versus tickets with flights. What I found interesting is that you can start to see how the story is going to play out over a certain amount of time, because at some point, when you look at investment decisions, return on investment, capex, even in terms of skill sets, offshoring, all of these sort of things you think about in a more mature environment, the tendency when it grows so fast is that sort of growth beats everything else, and you just want to go as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And every other sort of corporate governance function is there to sort of protect the basics, but you just want to be on a rocket ship and you've got to bootstrap and go. Yeah. And that also implies that from a risk perspective, you're sort of willing to take extremely high risks in certain areas that in some other companies you would be less inclined to take. So I think that's one, but also from the opportunity perspective, when you think about growth versus quality, for example, of revenue, and sort of what sits underneath it. So do you really understand your customers, how they're trading? Do you understand churn rates? Do you understand the reasons why your customers are leaving you? Are you thinking about saturation points? Are you thinking about what are your whales, right, targets and the profitability and giving and the customer service quality that you're giving? Because you're building a company that's hopefully going to last decades rather than that sort of bootstrap or rocket ship type of idea that we just want to grow.
If I were going to ask you to think about the future, so we've talked about what's happened in internal audit these last few years, but if I ask you to look ahead to the decade ahead, what would your crystal ball tell you that internal audit needs to be able to do better to better serve organizations in the coming decade?
I feel in such a rapidly evolving environment that we're in, as you mentioned before, I think it's really important that we sort of baseline our quality standards as a profession. Because I see, some audit functions are very forward-looking and innovative, disruptive, experimental, agile, all of these things that I'd like to do as well. But then I also hear from a lot of heads of audit, friends, colleagues, peers, they're actually just going by or coming by in a way. So they're looking just at compliance, or their stakeholders are asking, just give me assurance that these compliance risks are being managed, or just do this SOX work, right? Internal audit functions that just do SOX, or pretty much. The world is changing. It's always changing. Now it goes pretty fast. But I'll give an example. There's a recent McKinsey report. So if you look at generative AI, for example, people now talking about it, but there's actually a roadmap of sort of technology and digitalization revolutions that are expected in the next 10 years. So in 10 years it might be quantum computing, and then it's going to impact encryption and communication and things like this. And some of these things are a lot more closer by. They're data points. And I think being able to sort of say, how am I going to shape my guest auditor program, getting skill sets in, thinking about my sourcing, thinking about learning and development, being able to sort of create a path that's truly forward-looking. So if I ask somebody, what's your path in 5 years down the line of how you think internal audit should look like? I don't mind if people don't know it 10 years, but if people don't have a view 3 years down the line, I would get slightly concerned.
Yeah.
And I think then the question is, how did you get to that viewpoint? You should be able to answer that hopefully pretty confidently, which will then set you up for the next 3 years.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for these insightful comments and observations. I wish you all the best as you move into your new role and being able to continue to drive transformational change in your next organization and those that lie beyond. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And thank all of you for joining us as well. I'm Richard Chambers, Senior Internal Audit Advisor at Audit Board.